Well, good afternoon. Welcome to today's session of Ask the SCSA. Just want to welcome you here and let you know that this is a live webinar, and we'll also be recording it, and you can watch it later on YouTube. It is also on Facebook. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to add, please use them in the Q&A feature. So today we're going to go around and introduce our panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves. And Kieran, start with you.
Hi everybody, I'm Kieran. I'm a safety advisor out of the Saskatoon office. I deal with a few different regions around the province, and you might see me around if you're in Prince Albert, Macklin area, Humboldt, or around Saskatoon.
Thank you. Steve?
Hi, Steve Waldbar. I'm out of the Regina office. South of the number 1 is where I hope you'll start seeing me by the end of the year. Hopefully we'll be able to get out on site. And I've been here since November. Really excited to be here helping you out.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rick.
Hi, my name is Rick Rieger. I'm the Senior Safety Advisor out of Regina office.
And I'm Adam Drummond. I'm a trainer here at the SCSA.
Again, my name is Joanne Davis, and I am a safety advisor out of the Regina office. At this time, Adam, do you have an update from the training department before we get started?
Yeah, sure. We're training quite a bit. We got all our classes going, or just about all our classes going. We're still a few short. There is some ones that some people are waiting for, which we don't have any confirmed dates yet, so I'm not going to release anything yet. Other than that, check our schedule for all our training. You're looking for your core classes, come and check out our calendar and see when is a good time for you, but we are offering everything on Zoom now.
Thank you again, Adam. Okay, so today our topic is framing. So I'm going to start a short PowerPoint presentation, about 10-15 minutes long, and then we'll get into some discussion about this. Okay, so today we're going to discuss framing. So throughout the following slides, you're going to notice that not all the images that we're going to look at will necessarily have all the PPE required, but we will address this later in the presentation. So I just want to give a little disclaimer on that. And let's get started. So framing in the construction industry is known as light frame construction. It's a building technique based around structural members, studs, which provide stable frames to interior and exterior wall coverings. And you also have your roof, which comprises of horizontal ceiling joists and sloping rafters, which are also part of framing. You can also have manufactured prefabricated roof trusses as well. I do also want to include our metal studs. They do also offer advantages in your framing. Metal studs provide disaster resistant, such as termites and mold damage, unlike wood studs. Wood also has several advantages over metals. Wood studs are less expensive, more available, and they are easier and safer to cut, maintain, and repair overall compared to metal studs. Neither one of these products is energy efficient, or fire resistant, and both will require some extensive measures to create acoustical pleasing indoor environments. So let's get into some of the tools that we're going to use for framing. When it comes to, and some of the hazards associated with them, miter saws often result in severe cuts or amputations if there's improper training and use. And circular saws, the hazards associated with them is projected particles, electrical shock. You can also have breakage of the disc, cuts and amputations, blows caused by objects, abrasions, overstrain, and noise. So some controls you want to use for both of these. You want to inspect your saw completely. You want to make sure that the blades are sharp, And you want to check your material for objects such as nails and screws. You want to make sure hands are kept at a safe distance from the blade during the cutting operation. You want to wear the proper PPE, secure your stock being cut to avoid movement, and allow the saw to reach full power before starting your cut. As well with circular saws, it's important not to hold or force the retracting guard in the open position when cutting. And not to put your hand underneath the shoe of the saw either. Cut materials without overreaching. Keep proper footing and balance. And you also want to make sure that you do have the correct blade for either one of these. So whether you're using a framing hammer or an air nailer, training is important and proper use. Injuries from the nail gun can lead to trips to the emergency room. So don't assume that a nail will go where you intend. When it comes to the nail gun, it can glance off and slide and fly through unseen knots and miss a stud completely. So make sure that all co-workers are well out of the line of fire as well. Bump firing is when you keep your trigger pulled for rapid fire of the nail by bouncing the gun on the safety tip along the surface. This can also lead to accidental shots. It does definitely speed things up. However, it's a safer choice when using a nail gun to use a one shot for every nail and not do rapid fire. I have a couple more here. The nail gun is a hand tool where there's a tendency to focus completely on firing hand and ignoring the other. And often this leads to accidentally shooting your passive hand. So you need to always be conscious of where you are placing that hand. Okay, the next picture, I do have some common injuries associated with these last two. Crushing your finger. I think anybody in industry might, not everybody, but many of us have experiencing hitting our own hand, as well as when you're using an air nailer, and misfiring and having your hand in the wrong place can result in injury as well. Other equipment that we often use, you'll have air compressors. You may also have temporary power. It could be a generator, it could also be a power station that you may have set up, temporary power station. Just watch for the placement, even ground, and not overloading these, and for tripping hazards associated with those. Next one here, I'm working at heights a little bit in ladders. So no matter what you're using, whether you're using ladders or aerial work platforms, you do need the appropriate training. Make sure that you are following proper setup and inspection of your ladders, and make sure everybody is using the AWP, does have training and fall protection as well. Another hazard associated with framing actually is falling. So a lot of people think of the leading edge when they're falling, whether it be a roof or on the edge. They often remember that. So good fall protection or a guardrail system is going to be key. Don't forget about your windows. Your windows, when you're framing, they do not offer the proper guardrail height. So accidental falling out of those windows often occurs. And your holes in the floor, for whether your stairs or it could be something else, making sure you cover or put a guardrail around that hole is important. Another injury that's common in framing is actually falling objects falling on you. It's very important to wear your hard hat. People are working at heights around you, and having items fall could also result in injury. So heavy lifts often occur in this one. Sometimes you can have a crane come in and place the walls, and oftentimes it's actually the crew that'll be lifting your walls. So you want to make sure you prepare your lift and have enough people to do it, and be ergonomic strain, and make sure you stretch ahead of time. I have a little bit more on ergonomics on the next slide here. So ergonomics, work-related muscular disorder. The leading causes of this is gripping, nailing, lifting, working in awkward positions, applying force, repetitive motion, bending, working overhead, twisting, overreaching, squatting. So basically everything you do in framing. So you want to make sure you are taking breaks, maybe incorporating some better technology and tools, and making sure you're taking care of yourself with stretches as well. A lot of times when you're framing, you'll be working at heights, especially in roof framing. So you do want to make sure that you do have proper training and fall protection and anchor points and access to the roof and stability of the roof. Obviously you're framing it, so it may be unstable. So there are some extra key factors and paying attention when it comes to that. Talking about roof framing and laying out your trusses, you do see sometimes people may want to walk on top to lay them out, but there's other technologies and ways to do that. You can have a scaffold, you can have this system here where you actually have a full work platform and guardrail system, and that way you can work a little more freely, eliminating that or reducing that risk of falling, I should say. Next, I do want to talk about your PPE here. So I mentioned it earlier, not all the pictures had all the appropriate PPE that would be needed. Here is a nice list. Head protection, I already talked about this, falling objects and overhead objects. You want your eye protection. You may have ricochet nails and sawdust from cutting lumber and so forth. High-vis vests, important, especially when you do have some PME, power mobile equipment around you. Hand protection. Harness, obviously, for working at heights. Foot protection is mandatory for construction sites as well. Long pants. And then here we also have hearing protection. This is also very important when it comes to framing. Don't forget about that hearing protection. Whether you're using air nailer or hammer, you're making noise all day long and cutting material. It's going to be a noisy work site, and it's going to be for an extended period of time. So you do want to make sure you have adequate hearing protection. Okay, so framing is dangerous work. The bulk of injuries involved in framing, again, are struck by objects, slip, trips, and falls. Most of them are actually falling to a lower level, caught in or compressed or crushed. And they are preventable with the right measures. So important, make sure that you have important planning, training, and supervision, and making sure everybody is staying safe. Okay, so that was a little bit of information on framing. Let me just check. Okay, any comments on the presentation thus far?
No, that was sorry, my video, for whatever reason, just stopped, and so I'm gonna have to just go by voice here today. But no, that was a great presentation. You know, it touched base on a lot of the things in framing that you're gonna come across. You know, whether it be falls, if you got tools. Sound was a big one. I'm glad you touched on that. Like, you know, hard hat and steel toed are the requirements, and everyone knows about safety glasses, but that missing piece of the puzzle is you know, I would venture to say in most of your pictures, even that guy starting that generator, you didn't see earplugs in.
Okay, so I'm gonna start up and bringing up some pictures, and we'll have some discussions on them here. Let me just share my screen again here. So in this first one, I did discuss the tools. So now we have a couple scenarios of some circular saws being used, as well as table saws and the environment. So any of you have any thoughts or comments on these ones?
I mean, I'm going to guess that we're going to be able to touch on PPE in almost every picture where we can pick apart what they're wearing and stuff like that. So, you know, aside from the obvious, you know, I look at that table saw picture, and what I saw is the potential tripping hazard that he's got right beside him there, uneven ground. Like table saws are, can be one of your most dangerous tools out there. I'm glad to see that there's a guard on there. I've seen way too many sites without a guard on the table saw. But that 2x4 that you see protruding out there, yeah, and then is there somebody helping him on the other side, right? Like when you're cutting those long sheets, at some point you're gonna get to that mid-span point. Now, you will see people like they'll let go and come around to the other side, but that's not the ideal. Now you got a potential kickback and twist. Like I said, he's obstructed on both sides. So help when required for one thing, and then just making sure that your area, your walkways are cleared, you know, and then once you cut that piece, where are you putting it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and if you take a look at that guy or that picture on the left there where you have, looks like from what I can count, at least 4 people, at least in that photo, 4 people on site. Looks like they're all doing individual tasks there. So that's one thing to keep in mind too, just making sure you're aware of your surroundings and aware of where people are, especially with framing material. If you're carrying like 2x4s, 2x6s, sometimes you have longer pieces, you're carrying those and swinging them around. So there's a lot of opportunity or chances to be, you know, causing hazards with one another if you're not aware of where everyone else is and what they're doing on site. And one of the things too with framing, you know, I think more so almost than any other trade or stage within building of whether it's a house or whatever it is, it changes, the environment changes so quickly. Like both I guess the external environment, like as far as weather and that goes, I will be touching on that later, but I mean even just the stages of the building and how quickly that changes. So you come in and, you know, whether you're starting to put a floor on your basement walls or footings or what, and then, you know, you have those hazards to think about because you're dealing with putting on the floor. But then that doesn't take that long. Once you have your joists on and the floor sheeted, then you start dealing with the walls. And you look at these guys here, they're dealing with walls, and before long they're going to be putting either trusses or floor on this, and with that comes other hazards. And within hours, and sometimes with days or within the hours, the hazards change so frequently with framing. I'd say more so than you know, your typical trades or coming in different operations of putting together a house or a building.
And I'm just going to butt in here and talk about a little bit about something that I just purchased actually today that none of these people have. I don't know if you guys have heard about these noise canceling hearing protection, but you can get earbuds. There's a few companies out there that make them that supply noise canceling battery operated earplugs. Now I've actually gotten one that is more of a Bluetooth with speakers, so it's good for me for cutting the lawn, and that's why I actually got them, because they are noise canceling for that and I can listen to some music. But there's ones out there that just, they don't hook up to Bluetooth, but they do an amazing feature. I can keep them in all day and I can talk to anybody I want and leave them in and have a normal conversation, because there's actually mics on the outside of these things that relay the sound through speakers inside your ears. But as soon as it hears a loud sound, and I don't know how they did this, but the loud sound is canceled through your earbuds before you hear them. And so they just turn on right away like that. They are a little bit more money, but my goodness, I haven't worn, and before I never wore ear protection really all that much. I can't stop wearing it now. I wear it all the time, and I wish I wore it all the time before. One of the things that I noticed is these 3 lovely gentlemen here, doesn't look like they have hearing protection. Probably something I would suggest for anybody to wear it. No matter what the scenario is, you're turning on loud tools all the time, put in the hearing protection. Okay, that's me.
Thank you so much for your input. I do want to mention a couple things. So we did have a good discussion here. However, you see this one up in the right-hand upper corner is wearing a mask. So sometimes you're going to need that respiratory protection as well, especially if you're going to be cutting treated lumber. So that's going to be important. And even if just a fine dust, if you're doing that all day, you don't want to be inhaling that and getting that into your lungs. So wearing that respiratory protection appropriate for the task is also a good idea. So I did want to mention that. Okay, let's go to the next one. We're still dealing with tools on this one, but this is more towards the miter saw and having it nicely set up for ergonomics. And if it's your job to cut all day, there's going to be some hazards of repetitive motion there too. Any other comments on this one?
Sure, I've got one. If you're going to have a miter saw, what also goes great with the miter saw is one of those workbenches with the slide out arms. It's got the wheels on it. You can move it around. A lot of them are built that the miter saw, chop saw can actually be mounted permanently, and you can move it around like a dolly, and then you set it up. Go buy one of those. You'll thank yourself later in years when your back isn't bent up, or you don't have to have another person holding the one end because you extend that arm out, and then you've got an engineered solution to help you do your job better, safer, better quality because you're comfortable doing it. That's my tidbit.
Yeah, one thing, Joanne, that you mentioned is that when you're setting up a table saw, you're expecting that saw is going to be there all day cutting. Things that get missed is what are you doing with all your cut off pieces, stuff like that. So again, you want to think about your tripping hazards, how you're setting up. If you're going to be there, like I said, for a while, all those cutoffs need a place to go. You're going to want to kind of establish your whole surroundings. And I've worked on job sites, you know, like especially the larger projects where your chop saw guy is literally there all day. Like you give him a chop saw list, he'll call somebody when he wants another lift put beside him, but he's there all day. So making sure that you know, they don't actually have fatigue from that pattern sort of thing like that. You know, you want to make sure that it's kind of like, you know, we're told when you're sitting in front of a computer screen even is to get up and stretch. For them, it's actually refocusing on something else so you can get back to the task on hand. Because you mentioned, you know, being cut with the saw if you're not paying attention or somebody's talking to you, right? You do stuff too repetitively, your brain can not be thinking about the task at hand anymore. So those are a couple of things that I noticed. Yeah, and then like the guy in the bottom left-hand corner, he definitely doesn't seem like he's got a whole lot of room to work in there. So, you know, just make sure that after you're doing your cuts, you're not going to forget about the other things that are behind you. Like he's definitely up. So you cut, you're focused on that, then you turn around and forget that you're actually elevated or things like that as well.
Yeah, and if you take a look at that guy too on the left there, the way he's set up there, so in some ways he may be saving himself some risk by doing the cuts there. He's not going up and down. It saves some time. It's more efficient that way. But you know, how is he set up? Those planks on the scaffolding there seem to be quite staggered. Are they secured? Is the miter saw secured? Are there people working underneath? Those are some of the things to take into consideration as well.
One last thing to keep harping on personal protective equipment. If you look at the guy on the right-hand side in the far right there, it's about not just wearing stuff, but wearing it properly. He's got the little, he's got the buckle on the wrong side of his head in this picture. So when we take and we look at the way PPE is designed to be worn, that's supposed to be at the back, and there's a little arrow showing. So most hard hats do have the capability of being worn forwards or backwards, but the headgear doesn't deflect things the right way if it's on backwards.
Yes, that's an excellent point. If you're going to wear it, make sure, you know, you're supposed to be wearing it, make sure you're wearing it correctly. And it also is a good point there that there's two people there that be aware of who's around you and your environment. Okay, great discussion.
Well,
on
yeah,
this one.
even Joanne, with that one too, it looks like it may have been even in a park or
Mhm.
somewhere where it's open to the public. So I don't know if they have uh, their area secured or contained or anything like that, or if there's people walking around. So
Yeah,
we need
protection of the,
protection
yeah.
of the public as well. Yeah, because it almost looked like there was a park bench there.
Okay, so now we have this one here. It's got some ladders. Housekeeping, access. When you're building it, you may have limited access. So we got a few things to discuss here. Who would like to start on this one?
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind is when you mentioned access, right? So, you know, getting in and out of these buildings, every one of them is got some form of a hazard or another, right? Again, the first one, there I see a door, or and the last one with the ladder, like it's completely blocking off that particular entryway. So I don't see the other ones. You know, that middle one, man, if they're using that ladder to get in and out of that building, they're on sheeting that I would venture to say isn't nailed down. So you got slips, you got windows there, you know, you got a decent amount to fall, and then the hoses on the first one. So yeah, I just think of the potential injuries just for getting in and out of the building, let alone, you know, if there is an emergency. It's not going to be a quick in and out.
I guess I can butt in a little bit here. So Joanne mentioned about housekeeping. Let's be honest, this is disgusting. We can keep it better on site, way better than this. We've all tripped on stuff. We're just try not to. And the best way not to is by getting all that stuff off the ground and put it into the right place. Here's something that I learned growing up is that I became more and more of a kind of a clean freak kind of a person. And the jobs that I worked at, the employers always liked me because I always cleaned up. And not because I cleaned up, but because nobody else liked to, and I didn't argue about it. I just did it because I have a little bit of, I guess, OCD maybe. I like to keep things clean. But one of the things is it is so appreciated because people aren't stumbling over things. So please be that person that takes that responsibility to just start cleaning because somebody needs to. This kind of stuff can't happen on site.
And, you know, you go back, we always keep mentioning slips and trips when it comes to housekeeping, but I agree with you, Adam, like a clean work site actually makes everybody more efficient. So not only do you have less things to trip about, you know, every framer's got 2 long cords with them, right? Like they got their air hose and they got their electrical cord. And they're always like 1 foot short because it's wrapped around something. So generally they don't walk back and go unhook it. They just try to give it a yank, right? Well, whatever it's hooked around could potentially fall there too. So, you know, the better housekeeping you got, the less chance that there is that your hoses and cords are going to be wrapped around something. Then there's a less chance that they're just going to do the quick fix of yanking on it. And lots of times what it's hooked on isn't in their vision. I've seen more than once where a ladder falls over or a 2x4 falls over or something falls over because somebody decided to yank on their cord because it was hooked on something that it shouldn't have been. So that's another great reason for housekeeping.
And those are all great points.
And if you just take a look too, even with that middle picture and with all of these photos in particular, they're all at different stages of framing. So you have that one in the middle there where it looks like the trusses for the most part are set up or in the process of setup. You have one that's not in place there. You know, so it's not secured, and that's, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to framing, just the different stages of build and then the different hazards that you have to watch for. So especially with walls, like if strong winds come up, trusses, setting them up and things like that. So there's always that potential there if anything's not secured properly or not set or fastened in place for them to fall and to create a hazard.
Yeah, definitely on sites. A lot of times at the end of the day, when we're done with stuff, we'd go around and punch a few nails into our materials just to pin them down. I do want to mention here, it does look like that ladder is the first one, the first picture here. The ladder is set up not too bad. Does look like the proper ratio, and it is extending. It does look like it's pretty close to extending that 3 feet. Not secure, however, but yeah, I just want to point out there that is a good use of setup of the one ladder on the first that we see. The last one too, it's got fully extended, locked in place. It's pretty good. Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk about telehandlers here, some materials. Some equipment. This piece of equipment is often used on site. I do believe, Steve, that you were mentioning this to me.
Yeah, for sure. This is every framer's dream is to have one of these on site. You know, I've when I started in the business, you start as the guy that's throwing stuff up top. You know, now these are a lot more common. You know, even if companies share them in a neighborhood or whatever, but they make work a lot easier if used properly. You do have to make sure that the guy driving it is competent to be driving it, trained and competent. This isn't one of those just show them how to do it and watch them do it once sort of scenarios. They need actually classroom training to be behind the wheel there. More often than not, you're not going to be driving in perfect flat conditions. You get a little bit of rain, now you're sinking in the mud. You got issues there. Even when that dries up, now you got ruts. Just really being careful in regards to that. What I do like about some of these pictures here, like I see on that that one with the load mill, the yellow one there, he's chained right off. He's connected to 2 points, so it's balanced really well. There's no need as much for a spotter or to have a tagline on it, because he's secured in 2 spots on the machine. You're not going to twist, you're not going to spin. He can just get into place and put that up. The other ones there, what I do notice in the bottom corner, it doesn't look like there's anybody behind the wheel. I see an extended load there, and there's nobody in the wheel. So I would venture to say that he went to go land this in the building and nobody was there to guide him, so he just left it overhanging in sight, and I can see a worker inside there. So there's an unattended load there and workers in the building, so definitely no go. The top left hand corner, I would definitely say that guy should be using a tagline. If you have trouble on those heavy ones, we used to actually have 2 taglines, one on each side, because without a stiff tagline, you can over pull and then it just spins the other way and it can actually be dangerous. So if you're really, take the time, like to get that in there, and you want to stay back from that load. That guy's about to drive on really rough terrain, and that wall is going to swing towards that worker and give him a push, right? That is, he is not going to be able to stay balanced as he's walking and that machine is driving.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed too, I actually didn't realize there was a worker holding on to that wall section at first. Like, you couldn't almost see him, so, or her. But the importance of wearing high vis clothing or you know, some reflective clothing so that those that are operating the equipment can see you. So so there's that to keep in mind. And even just like you had mentioned, Steve, with the terrain, and again, and this was talked about with the other slides, making sure that housekeeping is okay and that there's good access to get where it is that you're wanting to go with these machinery and equipment.
Thank you. That was all good, great points.
Sorry,
Yep.
just I do have one more that you know, that often gets overlooked. Like if you look, those are extensions placed on those 2 sky tracks there, which they were really awesome inventions for exactly what they're doing there. A lot of those are aren't counted in the charts. So like when you're taking these courses even and you're learning about load capacities, that's what's a set of forks out front there. You're actually extending your equipment even farther out. And those load capacity charts that you have in your, that come standard in your books actually don't account for that extra 10 to 15 feet that you're throwing out there. So you really have to be aware of that, because you know, like especially I see in those two particular machines, they don't look like they have outriggers. So, you know, I've seen guys when they're unsure, they'll go with their outriggers low, which isn't the best either, but at least there's a safeguard there. And here, if that decides to tip because you weren't reading your chart right, like if you know the weight of that, you're not accounting for that extra 15 feet.
And another thing, just before we get to the next slide here, to keep in mind too, is just the rigging equipment that's being used here, whether it be the slings or the chains, and making sure that they're in good condition, that people know the proper way how to rig up certain loads, and even things like hand signals too need to be taken into consideration.
Definitely, thank you. That was a great conversation on these. We hit on a lot of different topics, and sometimes when we get to look at sites and things actively going on, we can see all the improvements and better ways to keep ourselves safe and our workers. The next one is something we talk about a fair bit amount here at the SCSA, and that is about holes in the floor or holes, you know, that you can fall into. So the next slide, I actually have some controls that we can put in place, but let's go over general housekeeping and concerns about these ones.
Well, in my classes, one of the things that I like to do is give out fun facts. And one of the fun facts I give out is open holes and how to cover them and what is required by legislation and all that good stuff. And it's a lot that there's a lot of people out there that don't know exactly what is required when it comes to coverings of a hole. A lot of people will say that it's a 3/4 inch plywood that you need to use. And that could be it, but that's not actually the answer. When you go into the legislation and you start finding about openings in floors, I'm going to quickly say here that in section 124 of the regulations, an employer, contractor, or owner shall ensure that any opening or hole in a floor, roof, or other work surface into which a worker could step or fall is covered with a securely installed covering that is capable of supporting a load of 360 kilograms per square meter. So just so you know, that's 793 pounds per square meter. It doesn't tell you what type of material, it doesn't tell you the thickness of a material. So I just want to make sure it's clear that it doesn't matter, well, it does, but it doesn't say in ledge what type or thickness. So if you're going to say it's a 1/2 inch plywood, that could be it, that might not be it. You have to understand that it's a weight. So it's 793 pounds per square meter that you need to be able to support when you're going to use a covering. So that's one of the ones that I talk about.
No, that's a great point, Adam. Like, I mean, you could look at virtually every hole that we see in the picture here, and I think we can all agree that putting a 3/4 inch piece of plywood over that is not going to be enough. And you know, as a experienced framer, that I found that these open holes were way more hazardous than your edge. Everybody thinks about the edge. It's your peripheral vision has that. You know, but these here, your brain's not ready for it. You're working on a floor and there's an open hole behind you, and these get missed more often than they should. That railing should go up as soon as possible, and or you know, sheeting like you said, Adam. You know, you can build a temporary floor below it and make that 3/4 sheeting good, whatever it takes. But those are definitely bad areas. And then even in that top corner one, you look at those windows there, and that wouldn't be high enough railing either to go through there, and that door opening. So you have to be aware of those too.
And Steve's just mentioning about the railings. In scenarios like this, because you're probably not going to find anything that's going to be big enough and strong enough to cover those, you are going to be using a railing system. The picture on the left, I'm just looking at a bunch of trees in the forest. I'm going to say that those people are working all by themselves. Remember, if you're working by yourself in a scenario like that, you've got to cover all your bases, put up your railings, cover the holes, do whatever you need to do so you're not going to be getting hurt. That's all I wanted to say.
You know, you just one quick thing with what you said, Adam, working by yourself like that should actually give you more reason to be safe, because you're a lot farther from help, right? So, you know, you can say, oh, no, nobody's going to catch me doing this. Well, nobody's going to be able to rescue you either in a timely fashion when you're not close to resources or out there working on your own.
Yeah, and what I noticed with one of the photos on the last slide, and even these ones here, and this is quite common what we come across, where you'll see is whether it be interior walls or exterior with the wall studs. So you'll have your vertical wall studs, but there's nothing horizontal as far as protecting people from falling outside. And sometimes not as big of a deal when you have like 16-inch spacing, but if you have like 2 foot on center spacing, you see that quite often. So people may think that with the wall studs, they have that protecting them from falling. But if you were to lean against or fall through those, that's not offering you a lot of protection. You see that with the photos here. Yeah, on the bottom right hand there, you see it with the left side, and there was on that photo on the previous slide where it was on a 2-story and it was exterior walls that was partially sheeted that didn't have that throughout.
Yeah. With these ones here, I'm just in my Fall Pro class, we teach you how to build a guardrail. And just an FYI for everyone, 36 to 42 inches is going to be your height of your guardrail. You're going to put a mid rail that's half of whatever your total height is, and then you're going to put a toe board in. Now, if you look at the toe board on the top right-hand corner, you might see something that looks okay, but technically, that's a 2x4 as a toe board. And in legislation, it says that you need a toe board at 4.9 inches tall. Who's ever bought a 4.9 inch 2x4? You don't buy that dimensional lumber. So most of the time you would see a 2x6. So at a glance here, I can see that these are 2x4s. That's 3.5 inches, just not going to meet ledge. Remember, use a 2x6. Use anything bigger than 4.9 inches, and then you're going over and above legislation.
Thank you. Yeah, I did put that picture in there purposely for that. It looks like a great system that could be a stairway opening, which a lot of times are left uncovered and unprotected. However, it is not the proper dimension for that toe board. Another one here, I put the stairs here. They're not always curved stairs. However, we have gone to many sites, and a lot of times we find that stairs that are being constructed are left without any handrail whatsoever, even temporary ones, and they are required to help you not fall off. So you do need them on the stairs as well.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see people maybe they may be tempted to or tend to possibly cut corners when it comes to framing, just because, like you said, Joanne, things are temporary. So stairs that are going into a basement, if they haven't poured the floor yet, it's like, well, we got to raise the stairs anyways or take them out when we pour the floor. So why would we put railings? Or we're bringing in sheets of drywall, and you know, the rails will get in the way. So why put them up if we have to take them down again? Even the previous photos when we're looking at ladders, like quite often you're taking a ladder, you're moving it here, then you're taking and moving it there. So the tendency to not secure them they may be more inclined not to do that because of the need to move them more often than not. So that shouldn't be a thing to overlook either and say, okay, well, because I have to move it right after, I'm not going to secure it. It's just a quick up and down. Again, accidents or incidents don't discriminate with that. So make sure when you are doing things that you're not cutting the corners, that you're doing what it is according to legislation, you're doing what it is so that you don't get hurt or have incidents or fall or anything like that. So there's just so many hazards when it comes to these situations, especially when it comes to framing.
One more thing with the railing too, it doesn't end at the framing stage there. Like, you know, when the framers are there, they're building the building, they put the railing up. that railing can get, like you said, Rick, somebody needs to move something to get it in or take something up the stairs or lifting a set of stairs. It'll get taken down and it can get put back up with the same nails. Like they'll pop the nails off with their hammer. They'll bend them back up. They'll put them, and your railing's actually getting a little weaker and weaker every time you do that. So you see them up there and your crew didn't put them up, like you're the next trade in there, I would definitely invite that to be part of your hazard assessment when you're starting your workday, is to ensure that those railings were properly done, because nobody takes responsibilities for them. Every trade comes in there and says, well, you know, I told so-and-so to do it, or they were up yesterday, somebody else took them down. Well, the fact of the matter is you and your crew are in there. You're responsible for railing for you and your crew. So it doesn't matter what somebody's done in the past. I mean, you can point fingers all you want, but the fact of the matter is if you're in that building and you're utilizing those areas, you're as responsible for that railing as anybody else was before you.
Thank you. Those are excellent points. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. And we got our power actuated tools. You will find these used in framing as well. So making sure that you have the proper training, obviously PPE is going to be another factor as well here.
Oh, I can talk about this one. This one, yeah. Now this is a tool, if you've never gone to Hilti Guns, if you've never gotten a privilege of using one, be trained and then use it. Don't just go ahead and buy this and use it. Figure it out, because it's a little bit more powerful. As you can see, the one gentleman with his hearing protection, his goggles, he's got a hammer. He's hitting the butt end of that Hilti gun. Now there is a little shot of gunpowder. It looks like you put a little bullet, or a capsule anyways. Kind of looks like a bullet that goes inside of that. And there's a nail at the bottom. And when you hit that, boom, it goes through that wood and into that concrete. That's a dangerous tool, I would say. I am just going to leave it at this. Do not just buy it and pretend to know what you're doing. Go and get trained on how to use this tool. It can be dangerous if it's misused. Very dangerous, and people have gotten hurt. So please make sure you know what you're doing with this one.
Yeah, it's I agree with you, Adam. This one gets overlooked in the framing aspect of things, because it gets used on the first floor, or not quite as frequently as the rest of the framing tools get used, but it's its own category in ledge. You know, it talks about the storage of your chargers. It talks about the proper training, and not just how to use it, but how to clean it. Like, so it's definitely a tool that is meant to be used properly. And you got to even think about what you're firing into. Like, you know, you're looking at yellow cartridges there. So they're firing into concrete, but you're going to want to use, you know, a different color. Your green ones don't actually fire as far. And lots of people miss that too, right? So you have actually different chargers with different capabilities on what they're going to shoot into, whether it's steel or solid concrete or concrete blocks. They're all different, and you know, firing with the wrong pin in there, or the wrong size of pin, you know, you only need to go a 1/2 inch in. Don't grab your 2.5 inch nail to go with that pin as well. So there's definitely a lot to think about it. This is one of those where actual training, you don't just show your guy how to run this and let him use it. This is I invite you to actually get your certificate in this.
It's a very good point. Training is so important, especially with this one. They are very powerful. I've used them before as well, and you do want to make sure that you are using it correctly. So the next slide here is going to be self-explanatory, but some good conversation. How important is weather when it comes to framing?
You know, we could actually touch base on its own topic on every one of these, because, you know, you go from the sunny up in the top corner, and, you know, there's the complaints about, you know, it's too hot for my hard hat, nothing's over top, right? You know, and then you're talking about sunburn and heat stroke. that sort of stuff. You know, even to the partly sunny and partly cloudy, where you feel like all the right conditions are there, so you're not thinking about the same things that you would in that hot sunny days of hydration and stuff like that. But when I do hazard assessments prior to a job, weather was one of my check marks on there, and it was just simply written as weather. So we would talk about what the weather was supposed to be for that day and what it was right now, right? Because, you know, you got different hazards associated with different weather. You know, we talked about the power mobile equipment earlier. You know, when it's raining and and you're trying to drive it in the mud, or if you've ever used the saw when it's just drizzling a little bit, not so rainy that the boss will let you go home, but enough to gum up your saw, right? So you're cutting something, that sawdust gets caught in your guard, you go to push it. So even though you checked it that morning, that guard worked just fine when you did your pre-use inspection on your saw. Now all of a sudden, that because it's drizzling, all of a sudden you're going to want to check your guard more often and clean it. Like, you're going to want to, you know, unplug it and make sure that it's not gummed up. So yeah, weather is definitely a huge consideration.
Okay, here the next picture actually has a little bit of snow. So this can, you know, cover up some hazards that you have. It creates very slippery surfaces. So a good practice is you would actually, if you come in the next day and it snowed a little bit overnight, is you're going to sweep all that up, clean up your work area completely. I think that's huge.
And that actually goes right back to the housekeeping that Adam was mentioning earlier. You know, you keep a good housekeeping, now all of a sudden all those little pieces of wood aren't hidden under the snow. It was definitely a common thing. Or, you know, you're asked to shovel off everything off real quick before it melts and everything starts dripping. Well, you're not shoveling chunks of wood because you dealt with it the night before. This snowfall happened overnight, you can tell, and then people walked on it before it started. But they started with a clean floor, and that is quite advantageous to the weather conditions, if you can think about that too.
Yeah, we're not really thinking too about this, considering the day that it is outside now, but this does come up pretty quick. And even with this, we don't know what the temperature is. It looks like it's sunny. It may be a warmer morning, but when it gets to those extreme temperatures, you have even like equipment like compressors may not kick in because they're too stiff. The oil is too stiff in the compressors, and even just touching that metal equipment like air nailers, you may have some gloves on, but it's difficult often to be able to do what you can with the types of gloves that you're using. And you know, you can dress properly for the job, but it's typically the hands and the toes that seem to get cold. You can layer up and do all those sorts of things, but you know, those are things to take into account as well when it gets that extreme, the weather.
Yeah, I just want to make one mention. I was building a second floor addition onto a house, and it was cold out. It was so cold that we had to go in and out with the air nailer because it only could last 10 or 15 minutes outside before it freeze up, and then we would have to go inside. But the tool wasn't the problem. My eyes froze shut because of the moisture from my scarf breathing out. I had water on my eyelashes, and I blinked once, and they didn't open again. I went to my buddy and I said, "That's it. We're calling it. Once your eyes start to freeze, you should stop working." Now, it wasn't a big deal. It was only a little bit of ice on my eyelashes, but the point is, tools and people do get cold, and we don't work so well in the cold. So we should take those breaks, even call it a day if it's too cold. Okay? Just remember.
Yes, definitely. That's it. I haven't heard that story from you before. So yes, you want to make sure you adapt to any of your weather conditions and make sure you follow the appropriate procedures for those. I think we have time for maybe one more slide, maybe two, we'll see. The next one here does discuss when we are bringing in cranes to help us with our framing application. We do have an additional risk that come into play as well. What's your feedback on these pictures here?
I'm just going to say, make sure that whoever's operating the machine and whoever's the tag person is a competent, somebody with training, knowledge, and experience to be able to do this. So just call up your buddies and say, hey, let's rent a crane. Let's start moving stuff. It'll be neat. No, 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 no. Training is, well, heck, legislation. You better follow legislation. There is a bit of information on these machines. Be careful. Make sure you know your surroundings, and make sure you have a meeting before you start moving stuff around to find out how you're going to move it, where you're going to move it, who's going to be involved, how you're going to communicate, where is everybody else going to be while we're doing this lift. Make sure that communication is the biggest thing when it comes to this, okay?
You know, I 100% agree with you, Adam. The pre-meeting, before the crane gets there, you make sure everything is 100% prepped. It's quite a stressful day, or it can be on a construction site, especially if you're you know, lifting a bunch of things. You know, from the supervisor's point of view, you got extra hazards on site. You're paying for a crane that's costing as much as your workers, so every second counts, right? So he's going to be more stressful that day. So if he can, before things get there, if the supervisor can just talk to everybody about what the actual goal is there, so you're not getting stressed out in regards to not everybody being on the same page. You know, that the workers shouldn't be below a load, no matter how light that load is. That worker that was on the top there reaching up for that set of stairs, no, there's never an excuse for that. You're on a construction site with 2x4s around, you've got tag lines, you use an extension cord, whatever, like, you never need to be below a load. But if you have those pre-meetings, it's like you can be your emergency meeting, and all that takes care of itself. The stress is gone, everybody knows what they're doing, and it can be a fun crane day.
Thank you for your input. So that's going to bring us to our time for today's presentation on framing. I just have a couple of things here. We're wrapping up the webinar. I hope this was useful. I hope you know, use this at work, even at home if you're doing a home project. Next week, we're going to be discussing the core and C-core process, its milestones, and we're going to be going over some helpful tips and suggestions to help you be successful. So we're going to have a great discussion with our advisors here on the panel. Don't forget that this is being recorded and will be available for later viewing. You can check out any of our previous webinars and on YouTube and Facebook as well. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you, fellow panelists.